The Habs got a win last night.
Yeah.
And they needed that one.
Grinded it out.
And, they had a lot of greats in the building. Max Domi blows a wheel on the carpet.
Oh, that's tough.
He handled it so well.
I know.
So well.
And he doubled down on Twitter today.
Twitter.
I thought that was great.
Yeah.
They need some positivity. Our buddy Tony Marinaro has been losing his mind up there.
Hasn't been happy in Montreal.
Yeah.
And that's all you need is, you get a couple wins in a row and people forget pretty quickly.
Yeah, and look, guys, I mean, even though they were in a horrendous stretch of winless in 8, the sense that I was getting from the group there was that, they were still competing. They were battling in games. Philadelphia's playing well right now. They get a point out of that game. The Boston game essentially was a 1-1 hockey game. A sketchy penalty call, and then the Bruins, I think it was Baca scores on the power play, and it ends up being a 3-1 game. But, Montreal felt like for the most part they were playing well. But you take out 2 guys out of that lineup, Drew and Paul Byron, and now Claude Julien can't use his depth. He can't go with 4 lines. And Drew was such a big part of that power play. What all this exposes is the work that Marc Bergevin still has to get done here. He desperately needs a power play quarterback, a power play quarterback defenseman. So that frees up Shea Weber to use that one-timer and blast it away. So that's one of the elements that they need. But anybody who was screaming for Claude Julien's neck and all of that stuff, that's not real, because you can see it in the way that the team is still playing, and maybe they kind of took some of the heat off with that win last night.
Yeah, I mean that's it's been a wild NHL. We've talked about it multiple times today throughout the past couple of weeks.
Well, the
every
Leafs were winless in 6?
Yep.
Montreal 8. And aren't they tied for points?
They're tied in points. Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, like
and
Minnesota.
Tampa,
we mentioned Minnesota.
Yeah, and Tampa has 4 games, I think, on the Leafs and are 1 point back.
Four games in hand with they're 1 point behind them.
It's like this is going to be all season long, I believe, unless somebody just goes on a heater.
Yeah, and it's why we're not seeing an abundance of trades or meaningful trades, because normally at this time, and I don't have the history book in front of me to read how many were created last year by post U.S. Thanksgiving. I don't, but just again, the feedback you get from managers, they're talking, but they're growing weary of talking to each other because everybody's in the same boat. You're battling each other. You're neck and neck in the standings. It's real difficult to make a trade that matters.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, but wouldn't you want to get ahead of it and be the team that makes a move and says, you know what, I want to make a move here?
Well, there are some teams, like Boston could make a move. Washington could make a move.
Montreal could make a move.
Right, well, but they're fighting, though, right? Like, Boston's in, and they're going to cruise, and they want to win a Stanley Cup and believe they can.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I'm most interested in the team that the Leafs are playing tonight. When you talk about the Taylor Hall sweepstakes, if that's even fair, from a trade perspective, Colorado's got to be in that, don't they? I mean, he'd be an excellent fit there. They've got the cap space to do it, and they've got the wherewithal to consider signing him, to the extension after the fact. The pill that's hard to swallow, though, is what is the ask going to be? What's the return? And that return is going to be adjusted if he extends with the team that he goes to. So you might be talking about an extra conditional first-round pick if he signs a contract. But I look at Colorado. Brad Treliving's pulse is probably coming down to just above normal, given everything that he's had to go through in Calgary. Sooner than later, he's going to put eyes on his roster and go, okay, I got to do something here, even though they seem to be playing a bit better of late. So maybe Taylor fits there. And Montreal. Like, Berge has cap space again. What's he got planned long term? The issue all those teams, though, is exactly what I said. They don't want to spend the young assets, and take a gamble on a player that maybe, even though as good as Hall is, are you comfortable with a 7-8 year extension?
That's what everybody says, though. They don't want to risk. They don't want to risk, but ultimately you don't do nothing. And I don't know. Sometimes you got to play for the now, don't you, Darren?
Oh, buddy. And Marc Bergevin isn't worried about his contract, his time in Montreal. So I shouldn't even explain it this way, but he's not going to be around in 4 years from now if things don't get better in Montreal. I mean, he knows that. That's not breaking news. So if you feel like Taylor Hall is going to make you that much better, man, I think you got to swing for the fence, don't you?
I think it's also the draft pick. It's become much more complicated.
Yeah.
Where if there's going to be this level of parity, if half the league, if not more of it, isn't sure if they're getting in or missing, trading a future first-round pick is a huge gamble.
We saw it last year, and I know. Remember out west, like the Oilers were 4 points out of the playoff spot for the longest time, but they had 5 teams to climb.
Yeah.
Instead of like throwing in the towel, they're like, well, we still have McDavid, still have Draisaitl. I still think we're going to see that down the stretch here. It may be out east this time.
Yeah, it will be.
The only time the first-round pick looks good is if you win the cup. You're like, wow, it's worth the gamble. Or get to a final.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I'm saying. It's one thing to do it as you're right up against the trade deadline and you've got a better idea of who you are.
Right.
Like Montreal can't trade a first-round pick right now. It could be 7th overall.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's
fair.
But you're right. The only difference is at some point, like O was saying, you got to take a gamble. You've got to dig in and go, okay, our core, we've got young players, but we've got 2 veteran players in Price and Weber. You've got to figure out how. And to me, I think it would come back to what would be the asking price? What would that even look like for Taylor Hall right now?
Yeah, it'll be similar to what Vegas had to pay for Mark Stone. A different circumstance, but maybe similar to a package like the one San Jose put together for Erik Karlsson. Karlsson had a year left on his deal. So you're talking about a good young prospect. Right. I'm going to talk about Erik Brannstrom tonight. My sense is he could be a healthy scratch in Edmonton tonight, but I still think that Brannstrom is going to be potentially a star in the NHL. I mean, he's got that level of upside. So you would need a piece like that and then a first-round pick. And again, depending on if you're able to sign that player, there's got to be something conditional that's attached to it as well.